like something like the Congo is just, it's just appalling how there's absolutely no attention paid to that. But it's not, you know, it's not deemed important by government, by media, by black folks, by anyone, because it's there. It's not Israel, it's not Egypt, it's over there. So, I don't know if I made any sense.
No, I get your point. I take your point. And one of the points, if I had had more time, that I could have gone into and should have gone into, was the fact that another handicap is that U.S. culture generally promotes parochialism and provincialism.
Right.
And that's probably too complimentary. No, really. I mean, you can drive that down a few notches, that description. And so we do live in the United States of America. There is an overarching culture. We are subjected to what's on television and what's on the radio to a degree. And if that's promoting a certain kind of provincialism and parochialism, it's not easy to overcome that. And then, you know, the reward system. I mean, faculty in here can tell you about the reward system at a university, where the reward system oftentimes is based upon publishing. And that's the carrot that's dangled before you, and you get rewards if you do that. Well, there's a reward system for being a U.S. national, as your comment suggested, which is to sort of go along with the program. And it's, as is well known, at a certain level, you can live a pretty nice life in the United States if you go along with the program and you're rewarded. And that if you decide not to go along with the program, the penalties can be quite harsh and quite severe. And that kind of reward system obviously undergirds what I was just saying this evening, because who wants to run the risk of being punished and penalized, particularly when the rewards can be lush if you go along with the program? I mean, that's a very difficult dilemma that needs to be underscored. The problem, I would say, is that it's not clear to me how long this present status quo is going to be sustainable, particularly given changes, titanic changes in the world today. But, as is well known, we know what the status quo is. It's difficult to make predictions about what the future may bring. And so it's easier to make a wager that the status quo will continue than to make a wager that it's going to change.
Yeah, thank you for the inspiring talk. I'm interested in the idea of the NAACP president going to the United Nations. And this is interesting for me because I'm wondering, what kind of impact that could have. So I don't see how the United States could be sent to the Hague, the way that Brazil or somewhere in Africa could say, yeah, you're violating human rights. So what impact can that have, on the plight of black people in America if the culprits here is the United States, considering, again, the issue you brought up, the World Bank presidency, those of us who follow that issue closely know that, the candidate the United States wanted wasn't really most qualified for that job. But because it's the United States again, he got the job. So what is the impact of such an intervention are the United Nations going to do for America, for black people in America?
Well, I think it has to be more than one trip to Geneva. I'm trying to stand behind Benjamin Todd Ellis. But I will say that it's going to take more than one trip to Geneva and one demonstration on December 10th, which is Human Rights Day all around the world. But I think that we can draw certain inferences from what takes place in Washington. For example, you may have noted just the other day that the U.S. Senate voted down an international treaty on the rights of the, quote, disabled, unquote, despite an eloquent plea by former GOP presidential nominee Robert Dole, who, as you know, has an incapacitated arm that came as a result of wartime injuries. And if I'm not mistaken, he was wheeled onto the Senate floor in a wheelchair. Now, it's very interesting. This international treaty, which basically only replicates U.S. law, the Americans with Disabilities Act, was attacked vigorously and viciously by the Republicans, which is curious, because as I said, it only replicates the ADA, and you had all of this rhetoric coming forth that this would allow the United Nations to interfere in the internal affairs of the United States. You may have also noticed that just some weeks ago, right before the US presidential election, that a West Texas political figure said that he wanted to raise taxes. This is a Republican. He wanted to raise taxes because if Obama got reelected, that he would be calling in the Blue Helmets and the United Nations peacekeeping forces to come to Texas to basically impose a new kind of regime. Now, of course, we can laugh, and we should laugh, but I think the inferences that I draw is that many of our opponents recognize that one of our most powerful allies is the international community. And so they're rather hysterical about the international community, to the point of even opposing treaties that duplicate US law, or talking about UN peacekeepers coming to West Texas. The long and the short of it is that I do think that we can utilize the international community more effectively than we have thus far. I mean, that's been our history. The reason I can stand here today, and the reason you can sit here today in this land-grant university that, shall we say, was once not very hospitable to people of African descent, is because of we were able to rally the international community on our behalf to change the U.S. domestic scene. But it won't take place just through a visit here and there, or a pronouncement here and there. It has to be part of an overall concerted strategy.
Adrian?
Well, I also want to thank you for your talk. I'm just fascinated because my undergraduate major was in international relations, and oftentimes when it gets to black folks, this global context is often lost, especially when we're getting into certain kinds of political and economic issues, so I appreciate it. One of the questions that I had was context, social context. And so I hear you talking a lot about Robeson, Du Bois, and this kind of international activism, but it seems like a lot of that activism reached its height, the apex, actually during the Cold War, or during this international context of the Cold War. So I wondered to what extent part of the challenge, or part of the lack of a kind of internationalist perspective within the black community is linked to the fact that this is a different era, right? So that this becomes a different political context. And related to that, I'm interested because I hear you talking about an internationalist perspective within the black community, but it seems like a radical internationalist perspective. And I emphasize that because we do have some blacks here today that will speak about issues abroad, but they speak about the issues abroad through a certain lens. Right? And so this gets back to kind of, you're within the United States.
With regard to Ralph Bunche, for those who may not be familiar, Ralph Bunche was a black American. He attended UCLA and Harvard, taught at Howard University in the 1930s. He was a man of the left, actually, if you look at some of his writings in the 1930s. But as the United States, under international pressure, began to try to incorporate more U.S.